I'll skip this, but I'll want to talk to you about this. And this is one of the most important things that I have learned in the last 5 years. And that is that the health of your fat cells, determines how healthy you are. By far, this is one of the most important things. So fat cells are healthy when they are empty. In other words, if fat cells have room to accommodate the fat that you're eating, they are healthy. So they can increase in size, but if you're insulin resistant and you keep packing more and more fat and you can't empty your fat cells, these fat cells then become dead. They say, no more, we can't take any more fat. They die, they get inflamed, and when they die and get inflamed, it leads to fat deposition in the blood vessels, in the heart, in the liver, and it causes inflammation and does all the bad things. Okay, so that was about insulin resistance. We said we need to respect the stomach acid. Why do we need to respect it? Because acid and pepsin together digest the protein along with muscular contractions, and that protein malabsorption, B12 malabsorption can occur. But most importantly, the stomach is an ecological barrier. You cannot underestimate that. Because when you take in food, if you have no acid in here, bacteria will grow, bacteria will go up and go into the lungs, cause pneumonia, or the bacteria will increase in small intestines, which leads to what is called SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, that can be damaging to you. It's been very nicely shown in this paper, in this book called Why Stomach Acid is Good for You, that as you get older, your stomach acid goes down. Another important thing that I'm telling you as to why cooking is very important, why eating raw vegetables may not be as good for you. Okay, so now I have to take the most difficult task of all, which is to describe to you the interaction between the microbiome. So in other words, the bacteria that they live in our gut and us humans. So I thought that there would be no better way to describe it than the branches of government that are designed to protect us. So there's an Office of Presidency, there is the Congress. It's supposed to protect us from disease like obesity, diabetes, from enemies, foreign and domestic. However, the relationship between Congress and the Office of the President does not represent a passive coexistence. They're not just designed to help us. It's rather characterized by a constant, dynamic, and intimate interaction between the highly dynamic and competitive lawmakers. What looks like peaceful coexistence represents a constant struggle to gain power over one another, and the result of a highly powerful special interest group, so that they can improve their own selfish self-interest. So I thought that this would be the best analogy to describe the gut bacteria and us, because many people think that the gut bacteria are basically there to do us all good, that there is nothing bad about them. The more they are, the better it is. Not so. So I don't want to call them symbionts. Symbiont means that they are helping us. I want to call them pathobionts, which means that their role is there to help us, but are they only helping us is not certain. So there's not a good definition for that. Why are they necessary? They are necessary because these bacteria get our stomach and our intestines and our colon ready to fight invaders. And the way they do that is that your defenses, your lymphocytes, your antibodies, your white blood cells are properly activated. In other words, you have a very good Army, Navy, and Marines, or an Air Force, or whatever you have. a group of defenders out here that are promoted by friendly people, by friendly interaction. So instead of looking like that, here you have all these blood cells that can fight infections. So the pathobionts are making us sort of protecting us from invaders. But like we said, there is an interaction, and this interrelationship between enteric bacteria and mucosal immune system does not represent a passive coexistence, just like I talked about the branches of government. It's characterized by constant, dynamic, intimate interaction between highly dynamic and competitive bacteria and our gut lining that is adaptive. It causes constant renewal. Our lining is made new constantly. We have repair mechanisms. So in other words, the microbiome is critical to maintain the epithelial barrier and mature our defenses. So that's how I would describe the interaction. So here it is. This is our gut lining. Here are these bacteria, the microbiome. They're supposed to protect us by making us ready for these pathogens. But we do a lot of things that can disrupt this. Or we can do a lot of things that would make this in excess. Like, for example, eat a lot of probiotics. So there are plant products, polyphenols, tannins, lectins, fiber, probiotics that can disrupt the balance. Okay. So when you disrupt the balance, here is a mucus layer, here is the epithelial layer, you cause a break in its integrity. In other words, instead of being tightly bound, gaps are created, and as these gaps are created, you get infiltration of bacteria, of potential antigens, and that creates an inflamed response. That creates a response from our body saying that, hey, these are all these foreign invaders, let's fight them. So that leads to inflammation. And one way to describe inflammation is that an inflamed, leaky gut can be because you had a bacteria that came in. And our body is making an antibody. It's an antibody that is there to neutralize the bacteria and kill it. But if this antibody is produced in excess, or if there is really no bacteria out there, instead of killing the bacteria, this antibody can kill our pancreas and cause type 1 diabetes. This antibody, if it's stimulated in excess, can damage our nerve cells and can cause multiple sclerosis. So how many of you have heard that gluten is not good for you?
Yeah, we've heard.
A lot. Do you know why? Okay. So this is a decent way to put it. So gluten affects something called a zonulin protein. So gluten is here. One of the things about gluten is that it breaks down into gliadin, which is another protein. The gliadin then comes and interacts with a receptor on a cell surface. In other words, there is an identifying protein that binds to it. And when it does that, a lot of chemical machinery gets activated and makes zonulin. So what zonulin does is that the lining of our cells is tightly bound together. In other words, there is no gaps in between them, and that is the tight junctions in here. Zonulin comes in and it works on these tight junctions and loosens them. So if you see here, zonulin is working and a gap is created. And when the gap is created, what happens is that all these foreign protein bacteria migrate into the lining of our gut, and they create an inflammatory response. They create a response in which we say, this is war. And war affects not just the person who is being acted on, but it also affects the person who is creating the war. It affects both. So a process like this is not just capable of defending us, but it's also capable of harming us. So if you activate the zonulin through gluten, a group of us can get celiac disease, diabetes, inflammatory bowel disease, heart disease, and other chronic conditions that are not related to infection. Okay. I'm still doing good with time. So you would say a plant is defenseless, right? How many of you guys think that a plant is completely defenseless? It doesn't have any claws, it cannot run away.
Excuse me, the Venus flytrap has teeth, all right? Okay, so they're not defenseless.
But plants are not defenseless. They have chemical warfare. They create certain anti-nutrients that make the predators respect them. And one of them is called lectins. They're found in red kidney beans. A group of young kids in England consumed these red kidney beans that were uncooked. And when they were uncooked, they have a lot of these lectins that go and bind to a protein on the lining of the gut. And this binding rapidly creates abdominal pain, diarrhea, vomiting, dehydration. Some of them ate as less as 4 kidney beans. They had to be hospitalized. They recovered. So one way to show what happens is that this lectin can bind, and here is the red blood cell, can bind to the protein on the red blood cell and cause agglutination. It clumps them together. So that's one of the mechanisms as to what it is doing to the gut lining. It's also studies show that rats fed lectins for as little as 2 weeks, 0.5% of their diet died in 2 weeks. So this is from Dr. Mercola. I promised you I'll give you balance. So in other words, I'm not saying, hey, don't eat plants. But here is from his side saying that lectins are present in all of these nightshades and different types of foods, tomatoes included, peppers included. So you would go out here and you'd be scared of going to the shop. You would not want to eat anything.
Absolutely not.
And then there is this one particular physician, Dr. Scott Grundy, who's made a career out of it with the plant paradox. He sells this lectin shield, which is very expensive. So you only need to look in a little further. Is eating red kidney beans bad for us? Man has been eating them for over 2,000 years, at least recorded history. And what happens is that if you take these red kidney beans and you heat them at 100 degrees for about 60 minutes, all these lectins are neutralized.
Right.
Or if you soak them overnight and heat them, there would not even be even traces of that lectin. So just know that when you are using plant food, that you should cook them. Okay. So how many of you know about polyphenols, flavonoids? So in grape juice, people eat grape extract. So in other words, grape juice, they have phenols. And these polyphenols, these are compounds that aggregate protein. They clump the protein, and if they're present in higher quantities, they clump it more, and then they clump it so much that the protein cannot be absorbed. And polyphenols are not only found in grains out here, but they're also found in fruits, but also in fruit juices. Polyphenols are preventing the absorption of protein. The polyphenols are preventing the absorption of iron. So here, this phytic acid, this polyphenol, this soy protein phytate, all of this bind to the iron that is present in food and reduce the bioavailability not only of iron but of several other minerals as well. So in other words, this is also an anti-nutrient. So influence of polyphenol on the digestibility of protein means that they reduce the capacity to absorb protein because they precipitate the protein. So the tannins are anti-nutrients, and here is showing that there is definite evidence that polyphenols reduce the absorption of minerals. But are there benefits of polyphenols? Because polyphenols are considered to be antioxidants. Even though the binding to iron is a drawback, it's a benefit because iron is an important oxidant, yes. It prevents oxidation of LDL, which is supposed to cause heart disease. It also oxidizes vitamin E. or prevents the oxidation of vitamin E, regenerates vitamin E, it prevents heart disease, it prevents cancers, it reduces aging because oxidation is one of the reasons why our skin lags down. So how do we get the polyphenols? So fiber is fermented by the bacteria in the colon, it releases polyphenols, the polyphenols act in the colon, but they can also be absorbed. Would it be surprising to you to know that how much absorption of polyphenols is there is completely vague? The studies are so few. How much of these antioxidants we are absorbing, we don't know. And once you absorb them, are they really effective as antioxidants? We don't know that either.
So Doc, is wine an antioxidant?
It's considered to be, but is it really? Okay. So what is a free radical? What is an antioxidant? So what's happening is that this is a healthy cell or healthy atom, and the free radical comes in and takes away its electron. And here is an antioxidant. It's a good guy with nice glasses, and it comes and says, hey, let me just give you back the electron. So that's what an antioxidant is. So people think, just like we thought cholesterol is static, that it remains at the same level for years and years, doesn't go up and down in a few days. We used to think that the gut microbiome, the bacteria that we have is static. It's not going to change. But that's not so. It says diet rapidly and reproducibly alters human gut microbiome. So this is a 5-day study. For 5 days, people were given either a plant-based diet, about 10 individuals, or they were given an animal-based diet. So for 5 days plant-based, 5 days animal-based, they checked fatty acids, they did cultures, they looked at bile acids, and they wanted to see whether bacteria change. So these were people with a body mass index from normal to a little bit obese. And this was a really well-designed study. Because if you look at the amount of fiber, the people on plant-based were eating a whopping 44 grams, 0 grams on the animal-based diet. Fat 22 versus 70, protein 10 versus 30. So this could not be more plant-based vegan diet versus a total animal-based diet. What happened to weight loss? This is just a 5-day study. A 5-day study, both of them are eating the equal amount of calories. Who do you think lost more weight? The animal-based group lost more weight. Statistically significant by day 4, you could see it. Day 4 and 5 compared to the plant-based diet. So what happens? So you have this colon, you're fermenting fiber, and if you ferment fiber in the colon, and what do you make? What nutrient do you make? Because we went through that earlier. Remember, you ferment fiber, the cows ferment fiber and make fat. So here they fermented fiber and made fat, but the animal sourced food people ate animal, and some of that protein will get into the colon undigested, and when bacteria work on protein, they will make a different kind of a fat. They're called branch chain fatty acids. So you can see out here that people on a plant-based diet, they had more of the butyrate, which is the different kind of fatty acid, whereas the people on the plant-based diet had less of the butyrate. This is supposed to be something that is feeding the colon. On the other hand, this is protein breakdown fatty acid. Protein breakdown fatty acid was higher in the animal-based group compared to the plant-based group. Now nobody knows whether our colon can also use this versus this. So when you are making more of this, you select out different bacteria, which is called Bilophila and Alice types and stuff like that. On the other hand, if you're fermenting fiber, you will select out saccharolytic bacteria, bacteria like Prevotella and stuff like that. So these are different bacteria that can either break down fiber versus break down protein. So here it is showing, and this is a very important paper if anybody is interested to look at, that there was a number of bacteria that went up on the animal sourced food diet, including Alice types and Basophilia, as well as bacteroids. And the only reason I'm saying that is that this microbial activity is very similar to the microbial activity that you can see in a carnivore versus an herbivore. So in other words, in 5 days, our human body is so amazing that it can change the bacteria depending on the diet that you're eating. Now, if you're eating a lot of animal-based food, you're eating a lot of fat. When you eat a lot of fat, you need to make more of the bile acids. So plant-based diet people made less bile acids because they're eating less fat, whereas animal-based people, because they were eating more fat, made more bile acids. How does the body balance cholesterol absorption versus elimination? So the body makes its own cholesterol. It can absorb cholesterol from food, but it cannot use cholesterol as fuel. It cannot use cholesterol as sugar or protein or fat. How does it get rid of the cholesterol? By bile. So obviously they're making more bile, right? Okay, so here it is summarizing. The gut microbiome rapidly responds to changes in diet. That bile acid resistant bacteria are selected when you're eating an animal sourced food. Weight loss is more with animal sourced food. Cholesterol production elimination increases with animal sourced food. Certain bacteria capable of causing human disease are selected with animal sourced food. I had to put that in for balance because that's what the paper claims, and that's what my friends who are gastroenterologists, who are infectious disease people are saying that. But also you need to make sure you understand that you're making less gas and you're spending a lot less time defecating or spending time in the bathroom. Okay, so one more minute. Sorry, I didn't realize that this was so important.
Take two.
Take two, thank you. The best diet, the best part about a diet is not eating. So in other words, there is nothing, there's no diet that will work if you're not doing intermittent fasting, because impact of intermittent fasting is tremendous on the brain. It makes new brain cells in the hippocampus, which promotes memory and association. It increases our parasympathetic tone. So parasympathetic tone is one in which as the parasympathetic tone goes up, your blood pressure comes down, your heart rate comes down, your heart rate variability improves. These are all good things. It improves the health of your blood vessels by doing all of these things, including glucose, insulin. It improves your heart, like I just pointed out, by reducing blood pressure and reducing heart rate. And it improves the health of your fat cells. The reason it improves the health of your fat cells is because it empties it. An empty fat cell is healthy because it makes more adiponectin. This is a hormone that a happy fat cell is releasing, saying that, hey, I'm good. I can take in more fat as you eat. So fasting is one of the most important things that you can do. All right. There is a vitamin B12 argument as why you should use animal sourced food alone. There is an essential fatty acid argument because essential fatty acids, EPA and DHA, are only found in animal sourced food: tuna, grass-fed meat, grass-fed cheese. Plant-based omega-3 is ALA, and although walnuts have a lot of it, the body does not convert ALA to DHA and EPA, which is what our brain needs. So I'm going to now skip to my summary slide, and let's spend some time on it, because we spent an hour discussing what's the optimal diet for humans. So I think that an optimal diet for humans is predominantly animal-based because protein is more complete. We didn't talk about taurine, but it's an amino acid that is not found in plant that we need for health. For the fatty acids, the omega-3s, for B12, animal fat is more tolerant of cucinivory. When you cook, animal fat tolerates that better. I think that we should eat protein in moderation, because I'm concerned about protein putrefaction in the colon, perhaps not desirable. I think we should cook our protein, especially as we get older. There is no diet that I can recommend without fasting, because fasting helps us by improving the health of our fat cells. If our fat cells are happy, we are happy. I think we should minimize starches and sugar because our pancreas is simply not designed to handle that load. Now, my position on fiber is changing. I used to say fiber, totally unessential. But now I'm saying, hey, maybe the gut microbiome may be partially important. Have about 20 grams of fiber. But make sure, like somebody asked out here in the audience, that you boil it, steam it, okay? And individualize, because not all of us are similar. There are people who are so intolerant of any plant food that they get rapidly sick. And some people are lactose intolerant. And some people may have issues with animal food also. So individualizing is important. So I think that's all I had. And I'm here to answer any questions. Sorry it took so long.
That was great.